The wagon wheels creaked to a stop in front of the weathered general store, just as the August sun began its descent over Council Bluffs, Iowa. And Olivia Sutherland clutched the ceramic crock against her chest like it contained her very soul, because in many ways it did. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia with nothing but 2 trunks, a heart full of desperate hope, and the sourdough starter her great-grandmother had brought from Bavaria in 1823, decades before Iowa had even become a territory, let alone a state. The year was 1867, and the Civil War had left the country scarred and struggling to rebuild itself. Olivia had lost her father and 2 brothers to the conflict, and her mother to grief shortly after. At 23 years old, she had found herself alone in a boarding house with dwindling funds and diminishing prospects. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like Providence. Respectable gentleman rancher in Council Bluffs, Iowa Territory, seeks correspondence with woman of good character for matrimonial purposes. She had written to Mr. Vernon Blackwood. No, she corrected herself, remembering the signature on the last letter, Vernon Barrett. The correspondence had been practical rather than romantic, discussing matters of homesteading, expectations, and the harsh realities of frontier life. He had seemed honest, hardworking, and desperately lonely. She understood loneliness intimately. Now, standing on the dusty main street with the wagon driver already unloading her trunks, Olivia felt the full weight of what she had done. She had agreed to marry a complete stranger in a town she had never seen, banking everything on letters that could have been lies. Her fingers tightened on the crock. At least she had this. At least she had a piece of home, a living legacy that had survived ocean crossings and generations. Miss Sutherland. The voice was deep and uncertain. Olivia turned to see a tall man emerging from the general store, his broad-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He removed it as he approached, revealing sun-weathered features, dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He was perhaps 28 or 30, with the lean, muscled build of a man who worked hard for his living. His clothes were clean but worn, his boots dusty from riding. Mr. Barrett. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Vernon, please. He stood there awkwardly, his hat turning in his hands. You're even prettier than I imagined. Not that I was imagining. I mean, I thought about what you might look like naturally, but I did not want to presume. Despite her nervousness, Olivia felt a smile tug at her lips. His discomfort was oddly endearing. Thank you. You look well yourself. They stood there in the middle of the street, 2 strangers who had promised to build a life together, neither quite knowing what to say next. Finally, Vernon gestured to the crock she still held. That looks important. Can I carry it for you? No. The word came out too sharp and she softened her tone. I am sorry. It is just very precious to me. It is a sourdough starter. My great-grandmother brought it from Germany in 1823. It is older than Iowa itself. Vernon's eyebrows rose with genuine interest. You brought sourdough all the way from Philadelphia. That must have been tricky, keeping it alive on the journey. I fed it regularly and kept it wrapped against the cold at night. She looked down at the crock, feeling suddenly self-conscious. I know it seems silly, hauling something like this across the country when I had to leave so much behind, but it is the only thing I have left of my family. My mother taught me to bake with it, and her mother taught her. It makes the most wonderful bread. That does not sound silly at all. Vernon's voice had warmed considerably. That sounds like bringing a piece of your history to help build a future. I think that is brave. Olivia met his eyes and saw sincerity there. Some of the tension in her shoulders eased. Thank you. Now then. Vernon replaced his hat and gestured down the street. I have taken a room for you at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. I thought you would want a few days to settle in, get to know the town, and make sure you still want to go through with this. I will not hold you to anything if you have changed your mind." The offer was generous and unexpected. Olivia had assumed they would marry immediately, as many mail-order arrangements did. "That is very considerate. My ranch is about 5 miles outside town." "It is not much yet, just a cabin and some land I am still building up. I have cattle and horses, and I am working on expanding. It is a hard life, Miss Sutherland. I want you to understand what you would be agreeing to before we make any vows." As they walked toward the boarding house, Vernon carrying her trunks while she cradled the sourdough, Olivia studied the town. Council Bluffs sat on the eastern bank of the Missouri River, serving as a jumping-off point for travelers heading west. The streets were a mix of established businesses and newer construction. People moved with purpose, going about their daily business. It was smaller than Philadelphia, but felt alive with possibility. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was a 2-story white building with a wraparound porch. The proprietress herself, a plump woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a kind smile, greeted them at the door. "So this is your intended," Mrs. Henderson said, looking Olivia up and down with frank assessment. "She is pretty enough. Does she know how to work?" "I do," Olivia said before Vernon could answer. "I can cook, clean, sew, and manage a household. I'm not afraid of hard work." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened into approval. "Good. Too many city girls come out here expecting frontier life to be romantic. It is not. It is hard and dirty and sometimes dangerous. But if you have got spine and sense, you can build something worthwhile." She stepped aside. "Come on in. Vernon, you can bring those trunks up to the room at the end of the hall." The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small table, and a chair by the window. Olivia set the crock carefully on the table while Vernon placed her trunks against the wall. "I will let you rest," Vernon said, lingering in the doorway. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow evening? There is a decent restaurant in town, and we could talk more." "I would like that." After he left, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the full exhaustion of the journey. She had been traveling for weeks, first by train and then by wagon, always moving forward toward this unknown future. Now she was here, and the man she had agreed to marry seemed decent and honest. But decent and honest did not necessarily mean they could build a life together. She stood and unwrapped the sourdough starter, checking its condition. The ceramic crock had protected it well, and the starter was still active, bubbling gently with life. She would need to feed it soon. Tomorrow, perhaps she could bake bread. The thought comforted her. No matter how uncertain everything else was, she knew how to do this. That evening, Mrs. Henderson brought up a tray with stew and fresh biscuits. She sat in the chair while Olivia ate, clearly intent on conversation. "Vernon Barrett is a good man," Mrs. Henderson said without preamble. "He came here 3 years ago with nothing but a horse and determination. He has worked himself near to death building up that ranch. He does not drink overmuch, does not gamble, and treats people fairly. But he is lonely out there, and a ranch needs a woman to make it a home." Olivia swallowed a bite of stew. Why has he not found a wife here? Because there are about 10 men to every woman in these parts, and most of the available girls are already spoken for or too young. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. "I am not saying you should marry him out of pity or practicality, but I am saying if you are looking for a good man who will work hard and treat you right, Vernon Barrett fits that description." "What about love?" Mrs. Henderson laughed, not unkindly. "Girl, love is built, not found. You start with respect and compatibility, and if you are lucky and you both work at it, love grows. Anyone who tells you different has been reading too many novels." That night, Lying in the unfamiliar bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a frontier town, Olivia thought about Mrs. Henderson's words. She had not expected love when she answered Vernon's advertisement. She had expected survival, partnership, and hopefully mutual respect. If more developed from that foundation, it would be a blessing. The next morning, she woke early and asked Mrs. Henderson if she could use the kitchen. The older woman agreed, curious about what Olivia planned to do. Olivia fed her sourdough starter, setting aside a portion, then mixed the rest with flour, water, and salt. She kneaded the dough with practiced hands, feeling some of the tension from the past weeks work itself out through the rhythmic motion. "My mother taught me this," Olivia said as she worked. "She said bread is about patience. You cannot rush it. The starter needs time to do its work, making the dough rise and develop flavor. Life is like that too." Mrs. Henderson watched with interest. "How old did you say that starter was?" "My great-grandmother brought it from Bavaria in 1823. She gave it to her daughter, who gave it to my mother, who gave it to me. It has been kept alive for more than 40 years, fed regularly, shared with neighbors and friends. Every loaf I bake is connected to every loaf my mother baked and her mother before her. That is quite a legacy." Olivia shaped the dough into loaves and set them to rise. "It is the only one I have left." While the bread rose and then baked, Olivia helped Mrs. Henderson with the morning chores. She made beds, swept floors, and helped prepare breakfast for the other boarders. The work was familiar and grounding. When the bread finally came out of the oven, golden and fragrant, Mrs. Henderson cut into a loaf and tasted it, her eyes widened. "Good Lord, girl, this is the best bread I have ever eaten." Olivia felt a flush of pride. The starter makes it special. The wild yeasts give it a depth of flavor you cannot get with commercial yeast. You could sell this. People would pay good money for bread this good. The idea had not occurred to Olivia, but it planted itself in her mind. She wrapped one of the loaves carefully in a clean cloth. "I want to take this to Vernon." She found him at the blacksmith shop, discussing some repair work on his wagon. He turned when she called his name, and his face lit up with a smile that made him look younger. "Miss Sutherland, I did not expect to see you until this evening." "I baked bread this morning." She held out the wrapped loaf. "I wanted you to have some. It is from my family's starter." Vernon took the loaf carefully as if she had given him something precious. "May I try it now?" "Of course." He unwrapped the cloth and broke off a piece. The bread was still slightly warm, the crust crackling under his fingers. He brought it to his nose first, inhaling the complex, slightly tangy aroma, then took a bite. Olivia watched his expression change as he chewed. His eyes closed briefly, and when he opened them again, they held wonder. "This is incredible," he said quietly. "I have never tasted bread like this. It is like it has depth, layers of flavor. How is that possible?" "The starter. The wild yeasts create complex flavors as they ferment. Each starter is unique, shaped by where it has lived and what it has been exposed to. Mine has absorbed flavors from 4 decades and 2 continents." Vernon took another bite, chewing slowly as if trying to understand the bread on a deeper level. "You made this, with your hands, and with something your family kept alive for generations." "Yes." He looked at her, and something in his expression had shifted. The polite distance from yesterday was gone, replaced by genuine warmth and something deeper. "Miss Sutherland, I know we barely know each other. I know you agreed to come here out of necessity, and I understand if you want to take your time deciding about marriage. But I want you to know that any woman who would carry her family's legacy 2,000 miles to keep it alive, who would get up the morning after a long journey to bake bread, who puts this much care into everything she does, that is a woman I would be honored to build a life with." Olivia felt her breath catch. It was not a proposal, not exactly, but it was the most heartfelt thing anyone had said to her in a long time. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me. Would you still like to have dinner tonight?" "Yes, very much." As she walked back to the boarding house, Olivia felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Hope, perhaps. Or the first fragile beginnings of something more. That evening, Vernon called for her promptly at 6. He had clearly made an effort, wearing what must have been his best shirt and vest, his hair combed back and still damp from washing. He offered his arm as they walked to the restaurant, and Olivia took it, feeling the solid strength of him. The restaurant was modest but clean, run by a Chinese couple who had settled in Council Bluffs to serve the steady stream of travelers. Vernon ordered roast beef and potatoes for both of them, then seemed to realize he had not asked her preference. "I am sorry. I should have asked what you wanted." "Roast beef sounds perfect." They sat awkwardly for a moment, then both started speaking at once, stopped and laughed. "You go first," Vernon said. "I was going to ask about your ranch. How did you come to Iowa?" Vernon leaned back, his shoulders relaxing as he shifted into more comfortable territory. "I am from Ohio originally. Grew up on a small farm, nothing special. During the war, I served with an Iowa regiment, ended up spending time in this area. After the war ended, I did not want to go back to Ohio. Too many memories, too many ghosts. Iowa seemed like a place where a man could start fresh." "Do you have family?" "My parents are both gone. I have a sister back in Ohio, married with 3 children. We write occasionally." He paused. "What about you?" "Your letters mentioned you lost family in the war." Olivia had known the question would come, but it still hurt to answer. "My father and both my brothers enlisted in 1861. They were all idealistic about preserving the Union. My father died at Antietam in 1862. My older brother Thomas died at Gettysburg in 1863. My younger brother James survived until Appomattox, but he was injured badly. He died 6 months after coming home." She took a breath. "My mother just faded away after that. She lost the will to keep going. She died last winter." Vernon reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm. "I am sorry. That is too much loss for one person to bear. The war took so much from so many people." Olivia looked down at their joined hands. "I stayed in Philadelphia as long as I could, but the city felt haunted. Everywhere I looked, I saw places I had been with my family. I needed to go somewhere new, somewhere without memories. And you chose Council Bluffs, Iowa." She smiled slightly. "I chose the hope of a new beginning." Council Bluffs just happened to be where that hope was located. Their food arrived, and they ate while continuing to talk. Vernon told her about the challenges of building a ranch from nothing, the harsh winters and the unpredictable weather, the struggle to keep cattle healthy and profitable. Olivia told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her father's work as a printer, her mother's garden. "What made you decide to answer my advertisement?" Vernon asked. "I am sure you had other options." "Honestly, I did not have many options." Olivia set down her fork. "I was a single woman with no family and diminishing funds. I could have tried to find work as a seamstress or a laundress, but those positions are poorly paid and precarious. I could have tried to find a husband in Philadelphia, but most of the men my age were either dead, injured, or already married. Your advertisement seemed honest. You did not promise anything you could not deliver. You were straightforward about the difficulties. I appreciated that. And now that you are here, now that I am here, I think I made the right choice. You seem like a good man, Vernon Barrett. I think we could build something together." His face brightened with such obvious relief and pleasure that Olivia felt her own spirits lift. They finished dinner and walked back through the town as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Vernon pointed out landmarks, introducing her to people they passed, clearly proud to have her on his arm. At the boarding house, he walked her to the door but made no move to kiss her or even take her hand again. "May I see you tomorrow? I need to get back to the ranch tonight to check on things, but I could come back in the morning. I would like to show you the property if you are willing." "I would like that." "Good." He hesitated, then said, "That bread you brought me today, I finished the whole loaf. I could not stop eating it. It was the best thing I have tasted in years." Olivia laughed. "I am glad you enjoyed it. I will make more." "You do not have to. I did not mean that I expected it." "I know, but I want to. Baking makes me happy." After he left, Olivia went upstairs and found Mrs. Henderson waiting in the hallway, not even pretending she had not been watching from the window. "Well?" the older woman demanded. "Well, we had a nice dinner and a pleasant walk. He is taking me to see the ranch tomorrow. And I think I will marry him if he asks." Mrs. Henderson smiled broadly. "Good. You two fit together. I can see it already." Over the next week, Vernon courted Olivia with earnest determination. He showed her his ranch, a modest spread with a sturdy cabin, a barn and grazing land stretching toward the horizon. He introduced her to his cattle and horses, explaining his plans for expansion. He took her fishing in the creek that ran through his property, both of them laughing when she caught a bigger fish than he did. He brought her wildflowers and asked her opinion on everything from where to plant a vegetable garden to what color to paint the cabin shutters. Olivia baked bread regularly, and Vernon insisted on paying her for the loaves he took back to the ranch. She protested at first, but he was firm. "If I was buying bread from anyone else, I would pay. Your bread is better than anything else available. You should be compensated for your skill and labor." Word spread quickly about the incredible bread available at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. Soon, people were stopping by specifically to purchase loaves. Olivia found herself baking daily, selling bread as fast as she could make it. The money was modest, but added to her sense of independence and worth. On a warm evening 2 weeks after Olivia's arrival, Vernon asked her to walk with him along the river. They strolled in comfortable silence, having grown easy with each other's company. Finally, Vernon stopped and turned to face her. "Olivia, I know we have only known each other a short time, but these past 2 weeks have been the happiest I have had since I came to Iowa. You are intelligent and capable and kind. You make me laugh. You work hard and care about doing things well. And you make the best bread I have ever tasted." Olivia felt her heart begin to race. "Vernon, I know I am not much of a catch. I have a small ranch and big dreams and not a lot to offer right now besides hard work and honest intentions. But I promise you, if you will marry me, I will spend every day trying to build a life worthy of you. I will respect you and support you and work alongside you as a partner. Are you proposing to me because you love me or because you love my bread?" Olivia asked, managing to keep her voice light despite the emotion welling up inside her. Vernon reached out and took both her hands. "The bread certainly helped," he admitted with a small smile. "But Olivia, I am proposing because when I tasted that bread, I understood that you are someone who brings life and legacy and care to everything you do. You kept something alive for 40 years and 2,000 miles because it mattered. You got up after losing everyone you loved and started over. That kind of strength and dedication, that is what I want to build a life with. And somewhere in these 2 weeks I fell in love with you." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. "I fell in love with you too. Yes, Vernon, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, and Olivia felt something broken inside her begin to mend. She had lost so much, but here, in the arms of a man she had known for only 2 weeks, she felt the possibility of building something new. They were married 3 days later by a traveling minister who came through Council Bluffs. Mrs. Henderson insisted on hosting the wedding at the boarding house, and what started as a small ceremony turned into a town celebration. Olivia wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Henderson helped her sew, and Vernon wore his best suit. They spoke their vows in the parlor with half the town crammed in to witness. Then everyone moved outside for a celebration featuring, naturally, bread that Olivia had baked the day before. "Best wedding feast I have ever attended," declared Mr. Chen from the restaurant. "That bread alone is worth celebrating." As the sun set and people began drifting home, Vernon helped Olivia into his wagon. Her trunks and her precious sourdough starter were already loaded. She was leaving the boarding house, leaving the safety of town, and heading out to the ranch that would now be her home. The ride took nearly an hour in the growing darkness. Vernon drove carefully, pointing out landmarks even though Olivia could barely see them. When they finally arrived, he helped her down from the wagon and led her into the cabin. He had clearly spent the past few days preparing. The interior was swept clean, wildflowers sat in a jar on the table, and the bed was made with fresh linens. A fire crackled in the hearth, driving back the evening chill. "It is not much," Vernon said, suddenly uncertain again, "but it is home." Olivia set the sourdough crock on the table next to the wildflowers and turned to look at the space. One large room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space. A doorway led to a smaller bedroom. Everything was rough but functional, built by Vernon's own hands. "It is perfect," she said honestly. "It is a beginning." That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and care, two people learning each other's bodies and hearts. Afterward, lying in Vernon's arms, Olivia felt more at peace than she had in years. "I love you," Vernon murmured into her hair. "I know it is fast, but it is true." "I love you too." In the morning, Olivia woke before dawn to find Vernon already up and dressed, preparing to tend to the animals. She rose and fed the sourdough starter, then began making breakfast. By the time Vernon returned, she had biscuits, fried eggs, and bacon on the table. "I could get used to this," he said, kissing her cheek before sitting down. "Good, because I could get used to having someone to cook for again." They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Vernon worked the ranch while Olivia managed the household, tended the vegetable garden she had planted, and baked bread. Twice a week, Vernon would take her bread into town to sell, returning with supplies and the money she had earned. The extra income made a real difference, allowing them to make improvements to the ranch faster than Vernon had planned. But it was not all easy. The work was hard and unrelenting. Water had to be hauled, animals had to be tended, fences had to be mended, and crops had to be managed. Olivia's hands, which had been soft in Philadelphia, became calloused and rough. Her back ached from hours bent over the wash tub or working in the garden. Summer heat gave way to autumn chill, and she learned to preserve food for the coming winter. Through it all, Vernon was beside her. They worked together, planned together, and slowly built their life. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Vernon mending tack while Olivia sewed, and they would talk about their days, their dreams, and their past. "Tell me about your great-grandmother," Vernon asked one October evening. "The one who brought the starter from Germany." Olivia set down her mending. "I never met her. She died before I was born, but my mother told me stories. Her name was Margaret. She came from a small village in Bavaria, married a man who wanted to seek his fortune in America. She was only 18, leaving everything she knew. Her own mother gave her the sourdough starter as a parting gift, something to take with her into the unknown. That must have been terrifying, leaving home like that. I think about her a lot now, about how brave she must have been. She crossed the ocean in a ship that took 6 weeks, arrived in a country where she barely spoke the language and had to build a life from nothing. When I complain about hauling water or my aching back, I remember her and I feel ashamed. She did so much more with so much less. Vernon reached over and took her hand. She did not have electricity or trains either, but that does not make your work any less hard. You honor her memory by keeping her legacy alive, but you do not have to match her struggles to be worthy. As winter closed in, Olivia learned just how harsh Iowa weather could be. The wind howled across the plains with nothing to stop it, piling snow in drifts that sometimes reached the cabin windows. Vernon had to dig paths to the barn daily, and keeping the animals fed and watered became a constant battle. Inside, Olivia kept the fire going and worked to keep them fed with their preserved supplies. The sourdough starter thrived even in the cold. Olivia kept it near the fire and continued baking regularly. The bread was a comfort during the long, dark months, a reminder that spring would come again. One particularly brutal January night, Vernon came in from tending the animals covered in snow and shaking with cold. Olivia helped him out of his frozen clothes and wrapped him in blankets by the fire. She made hot coffee and brought him fresh bread with butter and honey. "You spoil me," he said through chattering teeth. "I take care of what is mine," she replied, sitting beside him, "and you are definitely mine." He pulled her close with one blanket-wrapped arm. "I am sorry this is so hard. I know you did not sign up for winter like this. Vernon, I signed up for a life with you. That includes whatever comes. Hard winters, difficult days, all of it." She looked up at him. "Besides, this is still easier than what my great-grandmother faced. At least we have each other." "We do," he agreed, "and that makes all the difference." As winter gradually released its grip and spring emerged, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly, first with exhaustion that did not match her level of work, then with morning nausea, then with the absence of her monthly courses. When she was finally certain, she waited for the right moment to tell Vernon. She chose a mild April evening after they had finished dinner. Vernon was in good spirits, pleased with the new calves that had been born and optimistic about the coming season. Olivia brought him fresh bread, still warm with butter melting into it. "Vernon, I have news." He looked up, immediately attentive. "Good news or bad news?" "That depends on your perspective, I suppose. I am with child." Vernon's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, realization, wonder, and finally pure joy. He stood so quickly his chair fell over, crossed to her in 2 strides, and swept her into his arms. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. I think the baby will come in November or December. We are going to be parents." He said it with such awe that Olivia laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes, we are. I need to build an addition to the cabin. The baby will need space, and we will need more supplies. I should ride into town tomorrow and talk to Mrs. Henderson about what we will need. Do you need anything? Are you feeling well? Should you be resting?" Olivia caught his face in her hands, forcing him to focus. "Vernon, breathe. I am fine. The baby will not arrive for months. We have time." But Vernon was already planning, his mind racing ahead to all the preparations they would need to make. That night, he held her gently, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I hope the baby inherits your strength and determination," he said softly, "and your talent for making bread. I hope the baby inherits your kind heart and strong work ethic," Olivia replied. "Though honestly, I will be happy if the baby is simply healthy." Over the following months, as Olivia's belly swelled, Vernon threw himself into preparing for their child. He built an addition to the cabin, creating a separate bedroom for them and leaving the original bedroom for the baby. He built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth and carving simple designs into the headboard. He rode into town regularly to purchase supplies and seek advice from anyone who had experience with babies. Olivia continued her work as much as she could, though the pregnancy made everything more tiring. She still baked bread regularly, though Vernon insisted she scale back the amount she sold. The sourdough starter seemed to thrive, bubbling with particular vigor, and Olivia chose to take it as a good omen. "My mother always said the starter knew when important things were happening," she told Vernon. "It responds to the energy in the house." "Then it knows we are happy," Vernon said, kissing her cheek. In October, as harvest time approached, Olivia was too heavily pregnant to do much physical work. Vernon hired a young man named Tom to help with the heavy labor, and Olivia focused on preparing the cabin and supplies for both the baby's arrival and the coming winter. Mrs. Henderson rode out regularly to check on Olivia's progress and provide advice. "First babies take their time," she said during one visit. "You will know when it is starting. When the pains come regular, send Vernon to fetch me. I have helped birth more babies than I can count." The baby came on a cold November evening with snow falling gently outside. Olivia's water broke while she was kneading bread dough, and she stood there for a moment, surprised, before calling for Vernon. He went pale, then red, then rushed to saddle his fastest horse and ride for Mrs. Henderson. The labor was long and difficult. Olivia understood intellectually that women had been having babies since the beginning of humanity, but that knowledge did not make the experience any less intense. Mrs. Henderson arrived and took charge, barking orders at Vernon and guiding Olivia through the contractions. "That is it, breathe through it. You are doing fine. Strong girl like you, this baby will come when it is ready." Vernon held Olivia's hand, looking nearly as distressed as she felt. "I am so sorry. This is my fault." Despite the pain, Olivia managed to laugh. "Vernon, if you think you did this alone, we need to have a more detailed conversation about how babies are made." Mrs. Henderson cackled. "That is the spirit. Keep that humor. You will need it." Just after midnight, with Vernon supporting Olivia from behind and Mrs. Henderson coaching from the front, their son was born. He came into the world with a loud cry that seemed far too big for his tiny body, and when Mrs. Henderson placed him on Olivia's chest, Olivia felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "A boy," Mrs. Henderson announced. "Good size, healthy lungs, all his fingers and toes. You did well, girl." Vernon was crying openly, staring at his son with wonder. "He is perfect. Olivia, he is perfect." They named him Thomas after Olivia's older brother. Vernon held his son with such careful tenderness that Olivia fell even more in love with her husband. This man, who worked with cattle and horses and built with rough wood, held their tiny baby like he was made of glass. The first months with Thomas were exhausting but joyful. He was a hungry baby, and Olivia spent what felt like all her time nursing him. Vernon took over as many household chores as he could while still managing the ranch. He would come in from morning work, hold Thomas so Olivia could rest, then head back out. In the evenings, he would sit with the baby while Olivia prepared dinner, singing off key songs and telling their son stories about the ranch. "He cannot possibly understand you," Olivia pointed out one evening. "But he will someday, and when he does, I want him to know his father's voice has always been there." As winter deepened, they settled into their new life as a family. Olivia had to reduce her bread baking significantly, but she maintained the sourdough starter faithfully, teaching Vernon how to feed it on days when she was too tired. "This starter has survived ocean voyages and wagon trains and now an Iowa winter with a newborn," Vernon said one February morning, watching it bubble. "That is some resilient yeast." It has survived because people cared for it, Olivia said. Now you are part of that tradition. Someday, we will teach Thomas to care for it, and he will pass it on to his children. Spring arrived with the promise of new beginnings. Thomas was growing rapidly, becoming more alert and responsive. He would watch his parents with serious dark eyes, and occasionally gift them with a gummy smile that made all the sleepless nights worthwhile. As the weather warmed and the work of spring planting began, Vernon hired Tom again to help with the heavy labor. This allowed him more time with his family, something he clearly treasured. He would bring Thomas out to the barn in a sling Olivia had sewn, talking to the baby about the horses and cattle as if he could understand every word. Olivia gradually resumed her bread baking, working Thomas's schedule around her work. The bread remained popular in town, and the extra income continued to build their savings. Vernon had plans to expand the herd and possibly build a larger barn. "We are actually making this work," he said one evening, watching Olivia nurse Thomas while bread dough rose on the table. "Building something real. Did you doubt we would? Honestly. Sometimes. Not because I doubted us, but because frontier life is unpredictable. Disease, weather, economic problems, all of it could destroy what we are building. But we keep going and we keep succeeding." Life continued its rhythm through that summer and into the fall. Thomas grew, becoming more interactive and playful. He laughed at his father's silly faces and calmed to his mother's voice. Olivia started him on simple, solid foods, and Vernon insisted on being present for the first taste of bread. "This is important," he said seriously. "This is family tradition." Olivia spread butter on a small piece of sourdough and offered it to Thomas, who grabbed it with both hands and shoved it into his mouth. His expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and then clear pleasure as he gummed the bread enthusiastically. "He likes it," Vernon announced proudly. "That is my boy." As Thomas approached his first birthday, Vernon and Olivia discussed their future. They were doing well financially, better than they had hoped. The ranch was growing, Olivia's bread business was thriving, and they were building savings. But more than the practical success, they had built a home filled with love and purpose. "I want more children," Vernon said one night after Thomas had fallen asleep. "If you are willing. I know it is hard on you, and I will not press if you do not want to, but I love being a father." "I love our family," Olivia smiled. "I want more too. Thomas should have siblings. I remember how close I was with my brothers before the war. I want that for him." Their daughter was born in the spring of 1870, arriving with much less drama than Thomas's birth. She was smaller and quieter, with her mother's coloring and her father's calm temperament. They named her Margaret, after Olivia's great-grandmother who had brought the sourdough starter from Bavaria. "Margaret would have loved this," Olivia said, nursing her daughter while Vernon entertained toddler Thomas. 4 generations connected through bread and family. With 2 young children, life became even more demanding. Thomas was into everything, curious and energetic, while Margaret was content to observe the world with thoughtful eyes. Vernon expanded the cabin again, adding more space as their family grew. He hired additional help for the ranch, acknowledging that he needed to spend more time supporting Olivia with the children. The bread business continued to flourish. Mrs. Henderson suggested that Olivia teach other women in town how to work with sourdough, and soon a small community had formed around the practice. Olivia shared portions of her starter with other women, and while none of them produced quite the same quality bread, the sense of shared tradition and skill was rewarding. "You are building something beyond just us," Vernon observed one evening. "You are creating community through bread." "Bread is meant to be shared," Olivia replied. "My great-grandmother would have approved." Years flowed into each other, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and family growth. Thomas grew tall and serious, fascinated by the cattle and horses, following his father everywhere. Margaret was quieter but equally determined, preferring the kitchen and garden to the barn. A third child arrived in 1872, another boy they named Vernon Jr., who seemed to combine his siblings' best qualities. The ranch prospered. Vernon's careful management and willingness to invest in improvements paid off. They acquired more land, expanded the herd, and built a larger barn and additional outbuildings. The cabin, with its multiple additions, had become a genuine house, comfortable and welcoming. Olivia's bread remained legendary in Council Bluffs. People traveling through the town would often stop specifically to purchase a loaf. She trained Margaret to help with the baking as soon as the girl was old enough, teaching her the same techniques her own mother had taught her. "This is our legacy," Olivia told her daughter, hands guiding Margaret's smaller ones through the kneading process. "This starter has been kept alive for nearly 50 years now. Your great-great-great-grandmother brought it from Germany. It has survived ocean voyages, wagon trains, harsh winters, and now it is yours to help care for." Margaret took the responsibility seriously, approaching the bread-making with focused concentration that made both parents smile. Council Bluffs continued to grow and develop. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, brought more people and commerce to the region. What had been a frontier town was becoming a proper city. The Barrett Ranch, once isolated, now had neighbors on adjoining properties. Schools were established, churches were built, and civilization gradually tamed the wildness. Through it all, Vernon and Olivia built their life together. They weathered droughts and floods, economic downturns and personal losses. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, marked milestones and ordinary days. They argued occasionally, over money or child rearing or ranch decisions, but they always came back to the foundation of respect and love they had built. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1877, Vernon surprised Olivia by having a professional photographer come to the ranch. They gathered the whole family, Vernon and Olivia with Thomas, Margaret, and Vernon Jr., and sat for a formal portrait. "I want to capture this moment," Vernon explained. "Our family, our legacy, everything we have built together." The photograph showed a handsome, weathered rancher, his capable wife, and their 3 healthy children. But more than that, it captured a family filled with love and purpose. That evening, after the children were in bed, Vernon and Olivia sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Vernon asked quietly. "Leaving Philadelphia, marrying a stranger, building this hard life?" Olivia took his hand, weathered and calloused from years of work. "Never. This life has been difficult, but it has been good. You have been good to me and for me. We have built something real and lasting." "It started with bread," Vernon said with a slight smile. "I tasted your sourdough and knew I wanted to marry you. You proposed because of bread." "I proposed because the bread showed me who you were. Someone who values tradition and legacy, who works hard and cares deeply, who brings life to everything you touch. The bread was just the evidence." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder. "Well, I am glad my great-grandmother's sourdough starter brought us together. Margaret probably never imagined her legacy would extend this far. She would be proud. You carried her gift across a continent and used it to build a new life. That is exactly what she did." As the years continued to pass, the Barrett family became an established part of Council Bluffs. Thomas, growing into a capable young man, took on more responsibility at the ranch. Margaret became known for her bread, equal to her mother's in quality. Vernon Jr. showed an aptitude for numbers and business that suggested he might eventually help manage the ranch's growing commercial interests. Olivia and Vernon grew older together, their faces lined by sun and work and laughter. Vernon's hair grayed at the temples, and Olivia found her first silver threads. But their love, instead of fading, deepened and matured like the complex flavors in her sourdough bread. In 1880, on a spring morning much like the one when Olivia first arrived in Council Bluffs, she stood in her kitchen making bread. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, kneading dough that contained yeast descended from her great-grandmother's starter. Through the window, she could see Vernon and Thomas working with the cattle, Margaret hanging laundry with easy competence, and Vernon Jr. playing with the ranch dogs. The sourdough starter bubbled gently in its crock, alive and thriving after nearly 60 years of continuous care. 4 generations of women had tended it, fed it, and used it to nourish their families. Soon, it would pass to the 5th generation, to Margaret and whatever children she might one day have. Vernon came in for lunch, kissing Olivia's cheek before washing up. The gesture was automatic, comfortable, the kind of casual affection that comes from years of love and partnership. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, seeing her thoughtful expression. "I am thinking about how I got here. About answering an advertisement from a stranger and traveling 2,000 miles with nothing but hope and a crock of sourdough starter. About how terrified I was and how uncertain. And now I cannot imagine my life having gone any other way. This is exactly where I am supposed to be." Vernon pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to his heartbeat. Outside, their children's voices called to each other. In the crock on the table, the sourdough continued its endless cycle of life and renewal. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Olivia served pot roast with vegetables from their garden and fresh sourdough bread still warm from the oven. As they ate, Thomas talked about his plans for expanding the herd, Margaret discussed a new bread recipe she wanted to try, and Vernon Jr. asked questions about the ranch's finances that showed his sharp mind. Vernon looked around the table at his family and felt overwhelming gratitude. He had been so lonely when he placed that advertisement in the Philadelphia newspaper 13 years ago, desperate for partnership and companionship. He had never imagined finding this much love, this much richness in his life. After dinner, as Olivia cleaned up, Vernon came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too. Do you remember what I told you the day you brought me that first loaf of bread? That you are someone who brings life and legacy to everything you do, I remember. I was right. Look at what you have built here, our children, our home, our community. You brought your family's legacy west and used it to create something new. Margaret would be proud." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. "We built this together. Your strength, your determination, your love, all of this exists because we partnered together. Because I tasted your bread and proposed," she laughed. "Because you saw beyond the bread to the person who made it. Because you offered me respect and partnership. Because you kept your promises." They stood in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, and kissed with the easy affection of long married love. The years continued their steady progression. In 1882, Thomas married a young woman named Sarah from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on Barrett land. Their first child, a girl, was born in 1883, making Vernon and Olivia grandparents. Olivia shared a portion of the sourdough starter with Sarah, teaching her new daughter-in-law the techniques passed down through generations. Margaret, at 18, was being courted by a young banker in town. much to Vernon's mixed feelings about his daughter growing up. Vernon Jr., at 13, was growing tall and showing promise of becoming as capable as his older brother. The ranch had expanded significantly. Vernon now employed several men full-time, and the Barrett cattle were known throughout the region for their quality. The hard work of those early years had paid off in stability and prosperity. But despite their success, Vernon and Olivia never forgot the humble origins of their partnership. Each year on their anniversary, Vernon would request Olivia's sourdough bread, and they would toast to the bread that had brought them together. "To Margaret's sourdough," Vernon would say, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Olivia would reply. In 1885, Margaret married her banker and they moved into town where he was establishing his practice. She took her portion of the sourdough starter with her, carefully wrapped and protected. Olivia cried watching her daughter leave, but they were happy tears. Her children were building their own lives, carrying forward the lessons and legacies she and Vernon had taught them. Vernon Jr., now 16, had grown into a thoughtful young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's careful planning. He was increasingly involved in the ranch's business decisions, and Vernon Sr. was beginning to think about eventual succession. One evening, sitting on their porch as they had done countless times over the years, Vernon turned to Olivia. "We did it," he said quietly. "We built a life, raised children, created something lasting. That scared girl who arrived in Council Bluffs with nothing but a sourdough starter and hope, look at what you have become." "Look at what we have become," Olivia corrected. "I could not have done any of this alone. Neither could I. You were the missing piece I did not know I needed. The woman who answered my advertisement and changed my entire life." Olivia reached for his hand, their fingers interlacing automatically. "Do you remember being so nervous when you met me at the general store? You were turning your hat in your hands and could barely form a sentence." Vernon laughed. "I was terrified. I had built this image of you in my head from your letters, and I was sure you would take one look at me and want to get back on the wagon east. I was equally terrified. I kept thinking you would realize I was just a desperate girl with no options and no skills beyond baking bread." "No skills," Vernon shook his head. "Olivia, you have been the backbone of everything we built. Your bread business provided income when we needed it. Your management kept the household running. Your love made this house a home. And your determination to preserve your family's legacy while building something new, that inspired me every single day." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over land they owned, surrounded by a life they had built together. The sourdough starter, now more than 60 years old, sat in the kitchen awaiting its next feeding. Their children and grandchild were happy and healthy. The ranch was prosperous and growing. "I wish my mother could have seen this," Olivia said softly. "She would have loved our children. She would have been proud of what we built. She knew you had this strength in you. She gave you the sourdough starter because she knew you would preserve it and use it to build something new. My great-grandmother brought it from Bavaria. My grandmother cared for it in Pennsylvania. My mother kept it alive through war and loss. And now I have passed it to our daughter and daughter-in-law. 5 generations, nearly 70 years from Germany to Iowa. And it will continue. Margaret will teach her children. Sarah will teach hers. Your legacy extends beyond anything Margaret could have imagined when she left Bavaria." In 1888, Vernon Jr. announced his intention to marry a schoolteacher named Emily. The wedding was held at the ranch, a large celebration that brought together the entire community. Vernon and Olivia watched their youngest child marry, and they felt the particular bittersweetness of parents seeing their children all settled and starting their own families. Thomas and Sarah now had 3 children. Margaret and her husband had 2. Vernon Jr. and Emily were building a house on the edge of the ranch property. The Barrett family was growing and thriving, but time, while kind in many ways, was taking its inevitable toll. Vernon, now in his early 50s, had developed a persistent cough that concerned Olivia. He dismissed it as nothing, but she noticed he tired more easily and moved more stiffly. "You need to see the doctor," she insisted one morning after a particularly bad coughing fit. "I am fine. Just getting older. Vernon Barrett, we have been married 21 years. I know when you are hiding something from me. You are going to the doctor, even if I have to drive you there myself." He went, more to placate her than from any real concern, but the doctor's diagnosis was grim. Vernon's lungs had been damaged by years of dust and hard work, and there was no real treatment available. He would need to reduce his physical labor and take care of himself. The news hit their family hard. Vernon, who had built the ranch through sheer determination and hard work, struggled with the idea of stepping back, but Thomas and Vernon Jr. insisted they could manage the day-to-day operations. "You built this for us," Thomas said. "Now let us take care of it and you take care of yourself." Vernon reluctantly agreed, and he began spending more time in the house with Olivia. They fell into a new rhythm, one where Vernon did lighter work and focused on mentoring his sons while Olivia cared for him and continued her bread baking. "I am sorry," Vernon said one evening. "I know this is not what you signed up for." Olivia looked up from her kneading with exasperation. "Vernon, I signed up for better or worse in sickness and in health. Did you think those were just pretty words? We are partners. Whatever comes, we face it together." Despite the doctor's concerns, Vernon remained relatively stable for several years. He adapted to his limitations, finding ways to contribute without overtaxing his lungs. He worked with Vernon Jr. on the ranch's business side, taught his grandchildren to ride, and spent long evenings with Olivia discussing everything from politics to philosophy. Their 25th anniversary in 1892 was celebrated with their entire extended family. Children and grandchildren filled the house, and Olivia baked enough sourdough bread to feed everyone twice over. Vernon, thinner than he had been but still strong in spirit, stood and toasted his wife. 25 years ago, a brave woman stepped off a wagon in Council Bluffs with nothing but hope and a crock of sourdough starter. She agreed to marry a stranger and build a life in a territory that had barely become a state. She worked harder than anyone I have ever known, loved more deeply than I thought possible, and created a legacy that will outlast us all. Olivia Sutherland Barrett, you are the greatest gift I have ever received, and I thank God every day that you answered my advertisement. There was not a dry eye in the room. Olivia, her own eyes wet with tears, stood and hugged her husband. "And I thank God you were patient enough to wait for me to arrive, kind enough to let me find my footing, and wise enough to see beyond a loaf of bread to the person who baked it." They cut into a massive loaf of sourdough bread that Olivia had made specially for the occasion, and everyone toasted with pieces of bread instead of glasses of champagne. "To Margaret sourdough," the family chorused, the toast having become a family tradition. "To new beginnings," Vernon and Olivia replied together. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Vernon held Olivia close. "I do not know how much time I have left," he said quietly. "The doctor says I am doing well, but we both know this will not last forever. Do not talk like that. Olivia, we have to be realistic. I want you to know that these 25 years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life. Every day, every moment, even the hard ones, all of it was worth it because I got to spend it with you." Olivia pressed her face against his chest, listening to his labored breathing, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I love you, I will always love you, and I will always love you. But when I am gone, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will keep living. Keep baking your bread. Keep spending time with our children and grandchildren. Keep preserving your family's legacy. Do not stop just because I am not here anymore. Vernon, please. Promise me, Olivia. Through her tears, she whispered, I promise. But Vernon surprised everyone by continuing to thrive, or at least maintain, for several more years. He was careful with his health, limited his physical exertion, and focused on the aspects of life that brought him joy. He watched his grandchildren grow, saw the ranch continue to prosper under his son's management, and spent countless evenings with the woman he loved. In 1895, on a cool spring morning much like the one when they had first met, Vernon and Olivia sat on their porch drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. Vernon had been feeling particularly good lately, and they had fallen into the comfortable silence of long married couples who did not need words to communicate. You know what I am grateful for, Vernon said suddenly. What? That I advertised for a mail-order bride, that you answered. That you agreed to travel 2,000 miles to meet a stranger, that you brought your sourdough starter, that I had the courage to propose, all of it, every single choice that led us to this moment. Olivia smiled. I am grateful for all of that too. But mostly, I am grateful that you were the man waiting for me in Council Bluffs. It could have been someone cruel or dishonest. Instead, it was you. Vernon reached over and took her hand. I tasted your bread and knew I wanted to spend my life with you. Best decision I ever made. It really all did start with bread, did not it? It started with a woman brave enough to carry her family's legacy into the unknown. The bread was just the introduction. Vernon Barrett passed away peacefully in his sleep in the autumn of 1896, with Olivia beside him and his children nearby. He was 57 years old and had lived long enough to see his grandchildren growing strong and his ranch firmly established as one of the most successful in the region. The funeral drew people from across Iowa. Vernon had been respected in the community, known for his fair dealing and hard work. But it was his family who mourned him most deeply. Thomas and Vernon Jr., both grown men, wept openly for their father. Margaret traveled from town with her children. The grandchildren, ranging from teenagers to toddlers, all felt the loss of their gentle, loving grandfather. Olivia, devastated but determined to honor the promise she had made, remained strong through the service and burial. She accepted condolences, thanked people for coming, and held her family together. But at night, alone in the bed she had shared with Vernon for nearly 30 years, she let herself cry. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s but still sharp, came to stay with Olivia for several weeks after the funeral. She cooked, cleaned, and simply sat with Olivia during the hardest moments. He loved you something fierce, Mrs. Henderson said one evening. I saw it that very first day when he brought you to the boarding house. He looked at you like you were water in the desert. I loved him just as much. I know you did. And that love built something lasting. Those children, those grandchildren, this ranch, all of it is a testament to what you two created together. Olivia slowly found her way forward. She continued to bake bread, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, watching them grow and build their own lives. She maintained the sourdough starter with faithful regularity, knowing that Margaret's legacy depended on her continued care. Thomas and Vernon Jr. ran the ranch efficiently, but they made sure to consult their mother on major decisions, respecting her experience and wisdom. Margaret visited regularly, bringing her children to spend time with their grandmother. The house that had once been a simple cabin was now filled with multiple generations, all connected through love and legacy. On what would have been her 30th anniversary with Vernon, Olivia baked his favorite sourdough bread. She sat alone at the table, cut a slice, and raised it in toast. "To Margaret's sourdough," she said to the empty room, and then, softer, "To us, Vernon, to everything we built together." Olivia Sutherland Barrett lived another 20 years after Vernon's death, watching her grandchildren grow into adults and her great-grandchildren being born. She became the matriarch of a large, loving family, all of whom knew the story of how she had traveled from Philadelphia with nothing but hope, and a sourdough starter older than the territory itself. She taught every daughter and granddaughter who showed interest how to work with the sourdough, passing down not just techniques but stories. She told them about Margaret, who had crossed an ocean, about her own mother, who had survived war and loss, about Vernon, who had tasted her bread and proposed. "Bread is about more than flour and water," she would tell them. "It is about connection. Every time you bake with this starter, you are connected to everyone who came before you. You are part of a chain of women who refused to let their legacy die, who carried it forward through impossible circumstances, who used it to nourish and sustain their families." The sourdough starter, now more than 90 years old, had become something of a legend in Council Bluffs. People came from miles around to purchase bread made with the Barrett starter, and Olivia was generous in sharing portions with anyone who showed genuine interest in learning the craft. In 1916, as Olivia approached her 72nd birthday, she gathered her family together. Thomas and Sarah, now with grown children of their own, Margaret and her family, Vernon Jr. and Emily with their 4 children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all connected through the choices Olivia and Vernon had made half a century earlier. She stood before them, the sourdough starter in its ancient crock on the table beside her, and spoke. "I am an old woman now, and I will not be here forever, but I want you all to understand what this means." She gestured to the crock. "This starter has been kept alive for nearly 100 years. It has crossed an ocean, survived wagon trains, endured harsh winters and prairie summers. It has been fed by 5 generations of women in our family. It has nourished us, sustained us, and connected us to our past." She looked around at all the faces, seeing traces of Vernon in his sons and grandchildren, traces of herself and her own lost family in the mix of features. "When I die, this starter will pass to Margaret, and then to her daughters, and then to their daughters. But it belongs to all of you. This is our family's legacy, a living link to everyone who came before us. Promise me you will preserve it. Promise me you will tell the stories. Promise me you will remember." Through tears, her family promised. Olivia Barrett died peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1917, at the age of 72. She had lived to see Iowa transform from a rough frontier territory into a prosperous agricultural state. She had survived the loss of her entire birth family, built a new family from nothing, and created a legacy that would extend for generations. At her funeral, the family served sourdough bread made with Margaret's starter. They toasted her memory with pieces of bread raised high. "To Olivia," Thomas said, his voice breaking, "who carried her great-grandmother's legacy across a continent and used it to build a life of love." "To new beginnings," the family responded, the words meaning something different now but still honoring the tradition. The sourdough starter passed to Margaret, who cared for it with the same devotion her mother had shown. She taught her daughters, who taught their daughters, and the chain continued unbroken. The story of the mail-order bride who brought a sourdough starter older than the territory, and the cowboy who tasted her bread and proposed, became family legend. told and retold across generations. The ranch remained in the Barrett family, expanding and adapting with the times but never losing sight of its origins. The house that Vernon had built and continually expanded stood for decades, a testament to what two people could create when they combined courage, hard work, and love. And in kitchens across Iowa and beyond, whenever a Barrett descendant fed the ancient sourdough starter, they remembered. They remembered Margaret, who carried it from Bavaria. They remembered Olivia, who brought it west and used it to build a new life. They remembered Vernon, who had been wise enough to see beyond a simple loaf of bread to the strength and love of the woman who baked it. The starter continued to bubble and thrive, passed from mother to daughter, from grandmother to granddaughter, a living legacy connecting past to present to future. And with each loaf baked, each feeding, each time the story was told, Olivia and Vernon's love lived on, proving that sometimes the greatest legacies are built not from grand gestures but from simple acts of courage, care, and connection. Their love story, which had begun with a newspaper advertisement and a loaf of bread, had created something that would outlast them both, something that would continue as long as someone cared enough to keep feeding the starter and telling the story. In that way, they achieved a kind of immortality, not through fame or fortune, but through the love they built and the family they created.